The security ritual. He had traveled to conflict zones across the globe, from Kabul to Damascus, from Baghdad to Beirut. But nothing had prepared Michael Harrison, a veteran American diplomat, for his first arrival at Ben Gurion Airport. 3 hours. 3 full hours of interrogation, x-rays, bag searches, passport checks, and more interrogation. As he finally emerged into the Tel Aviv evening, exhausted and bewildered, his Israeli handler offered an apologetic smile. "Welcome to the machine," she said quietly. At the time, Harrison thought she was making a joke about bureaucratic inefficiency. Only years later would he understand that she was revealing the fundamental truth about how Israel actually operates. Because what the West perceives as paranoia, irrationality, or disproportionate response is actually something far more sophisticated and far more unsettling. It is the world's most advanced survival machine in action. And this machine is not designed for comfort. It is designed for continuation. The difference between these two objectives explains everything about Israel that the West consistently misunderstands: the misreading. When Western observers analyze Israel, they apply the wrong framework entirely. They see a small democracy surrounded by hostile neighbors and ask moral questions. Is Israel's response proportionate? Is it acting ethically? Is it respecting human rights? These are the questions of people who assume that survival is guaranteed and that politics is about managing comfort rather than ensuring existence. But survival machines do not operate according to comfort-based ethics. They operate according to continuation-based mathematics. And the mathematics of survival produce behaviors that appear irrational to those who have never faced existential threat. Consider how the Western media covers Israeli military operations. Every action is measured against the standards of police work rather than the requirements of national survival. When Israel strikes a weapons depot in Gaza, analysts count civilian casualties and debate proportionality. When Israel maintains checkpoints in the West Bank, critics focus on inconvenience to Palestinian daily life. When Israel intercepts aid flotillas, commentators question international law. These responses reveal the fundamental disconnect. Western observers are applying peacetime logic to wartime realities, civilian standards to military necessities, comfort expectations to survival imperatives. They are trying to understand a survival machine through the lens of a comfort machine. No wonder everything looks distorted. The trauma code. To understand how the survival machine was built, you must understand what built it. And what built it was not just the Holocaust, but the specific lesson the Holocaust taught about the mechanics of extinction. The Holocaust was not simply genocide. It was systematically engineered extinction, executed by one of the world's most advanced civilizations, implemented by bureaucrats, engineers, and scientists, supported by millions of ordinary citizens. It demonstrated that extermination could be modern, efficient, and popular. It proved that civilization was not protection against barbarism, but could be the instrument of barbarism. This realization produced what we might call the trauma code, a set of operating principles encoded into Israel's institutional DNA. The trauma code is not emotional, it is computational. It calculates that comfort is temporary, that civilization is fragile, that survival requires constant work, and that the cost of unpreparedness is extinction. Western observers often dismiss Israeli concerns about Iranian nuclear capabilities as Holocaust anxiety. They are missing the point entirely. The trauma code is not about historical repetition. It is about pattern recognition. It identifies the structural conditions that enable extinction and designs systems to prevent those conditions from developing. When Israel strikes Iranian nuclear facilities, it is not acting out of Holocaust memory. It is applying Holocaust mathematics, the calculation that allowing an enemy to develop extinction capabilities is an unacceptable risk, regardless of the probability they will use them. This is why Israeli strategic planning appears so paranoid to Western observers. The trauma code programs for worst-case scenarios, not because they are likely, but because they are possible. And in survival mathematics, possible extinction events must be treated as probable extinction events. The architecture of survival. The survival machine that emerged from this trauma code is not a military organization. It is a total social system. Every institution, from the military to the universities, from the tech sector to the agricultural cooperatives, is designed as a component of national survival. Consider Israel's military service system. Western observers often focus on its impact on Palestinian relations or regional tensions. But the primary function of universal conscription is not external defense. It is internal integration. It transforms every citizen into a component of the survival machine. The Israeli military does not simply train soldiers. It creates a shared database of threat assessment, risk management, and crisis response. Every Israeli learns to think like a system administrator for national survival. They learn to identify vulnerabilities, design redundancies, and prepare for failures. They internalize the trauma code and become capable of implementing it. Under pressure. This creates a society where survival expertise is democratically distributed rather than concentrated in elite institutions. Unlike Western societies, where security is managed by specialized agencies, Israeli society operates as a distributed survival network. Every citizen is trained in threat detection, emergency response, and crisis management. The result is a society that can pivot from normalcy to survival mode with minimal friction. When rockets fall on Tel Aviv, the city does not panic or shut down. It activates. Citizens implement procedures they have practiced since childhood. The survival machine switches from standby to active mode and continues operating. The innovation paradox. Perhaps the most misunderstood aspect of Israel's survival machine is how it generates innovation. Western observers often marvel at Israel's technological achievements while remaining puzzled by their origins. How does a society under constant threat produce so much creativity? The question reveals a fundamental misunderstanding of the relationship between pressure and innovation. The survival machine does not generate innovation despite threat. It generates innovation because of threat. Existential pressure creates existential incentives. When failure means extinction, the barriers to innovation collapse. Bureaucracy becomes subordinate to necessity. Convention becomes subordinate to effectiveness. Comfort becomes subordinate to survival. Consider Israel's approach to military technology. Unlike Western defense industries, which optimize for profit margins and political considerations, Israeli defense innovation optimizes for battlefield effectiveness. Technologies that work survive. Technologies that fail are abandoned. The market mechanism is replaced by survival selection. This creates an innovation environment that is simultaneously more focused and more creative than peacetime innovation systems. Israeli engineers are not trying to create products that satisfy consumers. They are trying to create capabilities that prevent extinction. The clarity of this objective eliminates most of the friction that slows innovation in comfort-based systems. Moreover, the survival machine creates unique innovation advantages. Military technologies developed under existential pressure often have applications that purely commercial research misses. The Iron Dome missile defense system, developed to intercept short-range rockets, has applications for autonomous vehicle navigation. Battlefield medical technologies, developed to save soldiers under fire, revolutionize civilian emergency care. The survival machine accidentally created an innovation ecosystem that Western societies are now trying to replicate through artificial means. Innovation hubs, startup accelerators, venture capital networks. But these are simulations of conditions that Israel experiences naturally through existential pressure. The democratic contradiction. This brings us to perhaps the most complex aspect of Israel's survival machine, its relationship with democracy. Western observers often express concern about Israeli democracy under pressure. They worry about emergency powers, military influence on civilian government, and restrictions on civil liberties during security operations. These concerns reflect another fundamental misunderstanding. They assume that democracy and survival are compatible systems that can operate simultaneously without friction. But democracy is a comfort-based system designed for societies where survival is guaranteed. It prioritizes individual rights, minority protection, and procedural fairness over collective survival and operational effectiveness. The survival machine creates a parallel system that operates according to different principles. During routine periods, democratic norms dominate. During survival periods, survival imperatives override democratic procedures. This is not democratic backsliding. It is democratic adaptation to survival conditions. Israeli democracy has evolved mechanisms for managing this tension that Western democracies have never needed to develop. It has legal frameworks for emergency powers that maintain democratic oversight while enabling survival responses. It has military institutions that remain subordinate to civilian authority while retaining operational autonomy. It has civil society organizations that can criticize security policies while supporting security operations. The result is a form of democracy that appears contradictory to Western observers, but is actually more resilient than Western democracy under pressure. Israeli democracy does not collapse under existential threat. It adapts. It maintains legitimacy by prioritizing survival over procedure while maintaining accountability through democratic institutions. Western democracies, built for comfort conditions, have no equivalent adaptation mechanisms. When faced with existential threats, they either compromise democratic principles through emergency measures or maintain democratic procedures at the cost of security effectiveness. Neither response is optimal for long-term democratic survival. The global laboratory. This is why Israel functions as more than a regional state. It functions as a laboratory for political systems under permanent pressure. The solutions it has developed for managing democracy under threat, innovation under pressure, and society under siege are being studied by governments worldwide. American police departments study Israeli crowd control techniques. European intelligence agencies adopt Israeli counterterrorism methods. Asian governments examine Israeli cybersecurity strategies. The survival machine has become a template for governance under 21st century conditions. Because the conditions that created Israel's survival machine are becoming global, climate change creates permanent environmental pressure. Cyber warfare creates permanent security pressure. Economic volatility creates permanent social pressure. Global supply chain vulnerabilities create permanent logistical pressure. The comfortable assumption that survival is guaranteed and that politics is about managing satisfaction rather than ensuring continuation is becoming obsolete. The Western model of democracy, built for stable, prosperous societies with secure borders and abundant resources, may not survive in a world of permanent crisis. The mirror effect. This is the most uncomfortable truth about Israel's survival machine. It is not an exception to the rules of modern politics. It is a preview of those rules under pressure. When Western observers criticize Israeli checkpoints, they are seeing their own future airports. When they condemn Israeli surveillance systems, they are seeing their own future cities. When they protest Israeli emergency powers, they are seeing their own future governments. The survival machine is spreading because the conditions that require survival machines are spreading. The question is not whether other societies will develop survival machine characteristics. The question is whether they will develop them intentionally and democratically, as Israel has done, or whether they will develop them reactively and chaotically when crisis forces adaptation. Israel's advantage is not moral superiority or strategic brilliance. Israel's advantage is that it built its survival machine early, when it still had the time and space to build it thoughtfully. It developed survival capabilities while maintaining democratic institutions, innovation systems, and social cohesion. Other societies may not have the same luxury. If they wait until survival pressure forces adaptation, they may develop survival capabilities at the cost of everything else that makes societies worth preserving. The choice ahead. The West faces a fundamental choice. It can continue to judge Israel by the standards of a comfortable past, or it can learn from Israel the requirements of a dangerous future. It can continue to apply comfort-based ethics to survival-based realities, or it can develop new frameworks for understanding politics under pressure. This does not mean accepting everything Israel does or adopting Israeli methods wholesale. It means recognizing that survival machines operate according to different logic than comfort machines, and that this logic may become more relevant as global conditions deteriorate. The survival machine is not going away. The threats that created it are intensifying. The technologies that enable it are spreading. The logic that drives it is proving more durable than the logic of comfortable democracy. Israel will continue to exist not because it is morally superior, but because it is systemically prepared. It has built institutions designed for permanent pressure, developed culture adapted for continuous crisis, and created capabilities tested under real conditions. The rest of the world can continue building comfort machines and hope that comfort conditions persist. Or it can begin building survival machines while there is still time to build them thoughtfully. The machine does not care about moral approval. It cares about continued existence, and existence, as Israel has learned, is not a right. It is an achievement that requires constant work. The only question is whether that work will be done voluntarily or whether reality will eventually force it upon societies that preferred comfort to continuation. The mirror is reflecting. The choice is ours.